Hey, howdy and hello, folks. Welcome back into T1A. Tank here with you today. I hope you're ready for the tantalizing talk of top 5 tight ends. Let's go. Yo, all right. Wrapping up all the top 5 episodes here with top 5 tight ends. Kind of got a Lloyd Christmas thing going on here. Pumpkin pie haircut at freak. Anyways, let's take a look at the top 5 tight ends I've got on my list. Number 1, pretty easy slam dunk here. Travis Kelce comes back in for another season, being the top target getter. They really haven't brought in any receivers yet to take the spot from him. So it's going to be one more year. But how many more years do we have after that? Doesn't matter. We're talking about this year. Still going to be the top volume getter. Last year, he ended up with 110 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 12 touchdowns. I know he had that monster, 5, 6 touchdown game, but that's what he can get you. He can win you a week by himself. He can win you weeks by himself. You have him stacked with Mahomes. You've got multiple weeks just with those two. So definitely a power combo. If you can get Mahomes and Kelce, it's just a slam dunk. It's going to be hard to beat your team week in and week out. Number 2, Mark Andrews. Each year, Mark Andrews, despite who's throwing him the football, seems to keep producing. Doesn't matter how many wide receivers, good ones, bad ones, running backs, doesn't matter. Mark Andrews continues to be a top 5 tight end. Out of the 15 games he played last year, 12 were with Lamar, and he still finished as a top 5 tight end, posting up 73 receptions, 847 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But that was enough to be a solid benchmark of a tight end. I mean, that's fortunately the best we can ask if it's not Kelce. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson. Now, it might seem high for some people, but for me, it's just about that consistent volume. He saw 129 targets last year, and that's with being split between 2 different teams. He was still able to produce once he got to Minnesota and became a reliable target for Kirk Cousins. With Addison coming there, yeah, do I expect him to get 129 targets again? Probably not. But he is going to still see some red zone work because you've got to cover Justin Jefferson. They're going to have to cover Addison. They're going to have to cover Hawkinson. And they're going to have to cover Cook. It's just too much for a defense to cover them all. And it's going to lead to some opportunities for TJ Hawkinson to get some touchdowns. And that's going to be the big thing that keeps him in the top 5 this year, is that those red zone looks where defenses are keying too much in on the receivers and the running back, and he slips into the zone, kind of like what Kelce does teams week in and week out. But Hawk will be able to do the same thing, exploit some zones. And the NFC North, not the strongest defenses this year. Still a lot of rebuilding going on. So I would see that Minnesota is going to look to take advantage of a lot of their conference mates and really put it to them by just running up the score where they can. There's a limited run for Kirk Cousins left, and I really think that they're going to try to do their best to make a push this year. Aaron Rodgers is out of the division. There's Justin Fields, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff. So I think the NFC North is going to run through either Minnesota or Detroit, and I think Hawk is going to be a big benefactor from the way that this offense is going to run. Number 4. That's right, folks. Dallas Goedert. Everything going on in Philadelphia with A.J. Brown coming in, Devonta Smith going into his second year, Jalen Hurts emerging, Miles Sanders having a great year, the defense getting all those ridiculous amount of great players. There was still Dallas Goedert. He came in with only 12 games played and finished fifth on the season with fantasy points per game at 11.8. So although he only had 3 touchdowns on the year, he had 12 plays over 20 yards. With only being in 12 games, he still could be a bigger factor to what happens to the other 2 receivers. I think a lot of those touches will come from Devonta Smith and kind of split a little bit back into Dallas Goedert's favor. With only the 12 games played, he still came in 12th on the year. So it just proves that he's still part of that offense and he's still going to be a focus. The 5 games he missed, those were some of the biggest games that Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown had. One of them being, I think it was week 15 at Chicago. That's when A.J. Brown had 16 targets and Devonta still had 8. That's a huge passing workload between 2 players. And then the next week, Dallas Goedert came back and they never got to see that kind of threshold between the 2 receivers as far as what they got in volume. So originally, I was going to have Kyle Pitts in my top 5, but the more I looked at it, the more I couldn't rely on that system to feed Kyle Pitts enough. The Atlanta Falcons offensive line is supposed to be phenomenal, so maybe they put him off the line, maybe they split him more, maybe he's developed more as a blocker. Who knows? There's so many questionables about what he is. Is he still a generational talent? For me, it comes down to I need to see it. I haven't seen it enough in the first 2 years to say that slam dunk, top 5, get him in my lineup. But the one I can, Darren Waller. He is going to be one of the top targets in the Giants system because he's going to be consistent. He's going to work to find his openings, and he's going to be so QB friendly that Danny Dimes is going to be relying on him. You are going to see the Giants throw a splattering of wide receivers on the field, down the field, throwing stretches, and Darren Waller is going to be the biggest benefactor because he's going to be in all that short yardage. He knows how to scramble with the quarterback, find pockets in the defense. He's going to be coming in healthy, which he hasn't done in a long time. He's been working already all off season with Danny Dimes and getting his quarterback flow in. So by the time that they get to training camps and going into preseason, I see Danny Dimes being so comfortable with Waller. He's his #1 target volume, and you will see a smattering of the other guys receiving 5, 6, 7 targets, and he's going to have that flux wide receiver, kind of like what they did last year of, oh, this guy's good this week and that guy's good this week. But the tight end position is one of the ones that was going solid before Daniel Bellinger had his eye injury. Now you bring in a more prolific, pass-catching, overall even just better football player in Darren Waller, and how much better he is over Daniel Bellinger. This is the guy that you're going to want to lock in your rosters, and you're probably going to get him cheap this year because everybody's going to see him as like a 1-year rental. Great. Go win yourself a championship, and then you can rebuild a little bit next year or retool. That is my top 5 tight ends. We've gone through wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks. These aren't guys that you need to have one of each of. This is a strategy of looking at having a top 5 guy or 2 is phenomenal for your team. But look at where their value is when you're drafting. Just because they're in my top 5 doesn't mean, oh, if they're in the first 5 rounds, locking these guys down. No, I'm going to still find the value of getting Dallas Goedert in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, seeing where he falls. Okay, I'm going to fade the tight end just a little bit more. Maybe in the 8th round, I get Darren Waller. It just depends on where these ADPs are going to fall and how the value on these guys are going to go and where I'm going to get them. But as I'm seeing it, these are the guys that I see finishing in the top 5. And I see these guys as someone who you should have or get, but don't overpay. That's not the point of all of these top 5s. This is kind of showing and highlighting the guys that are going to finish up at the top 5 and the path that they get there, so that as people are growing and watching with us, they can start to see these patterns of why are these guys choosing, Mark Andrews year after year. It's because he sees a consistent workload that hasn't ceased despite the quarterback, despite the system, despite the other wide receivers around him. It's all about creating this consistency and finding those stats that you can hone in on and see targets, volume, and a path to either scoring touchdowns or a path to a ridiculous workload in receiving. Hope you guys got some benefit out of it. If so, throw me a like. And I still haven't had any comments on these videos about where I got it wrong, so I'm just going to assume that they're all correct and you guys all agree with me. Until next time, you guys have a great one.